Welcome everyone to the webinar. This is Kaylee Hamer with MachineMetrics. We're so excited to have you here today. So without further ado, we'll just jump right in. Today we have Bill Byther, the co-founder and CEO of MachineMetrics, along with Mark Stevens from Wipfli, who will be presenting on how to turn reactive decisions into proactive solutions. Before we get started today, I just want to make a couple announcements. Questions can be asked in the Q&A throughout the webinar. We do encourage you to ask as many questions as you have. We have the experts here with us today, so you might as well get the answers. After the webinar is over, you will receive a recording of the webinar along with the slide deck. A quick agenda, MachineMetrics, the review of the platform, that will be Bill here in just a second, and then we will move into Wipfli's presentation on combining that tool and platform, MachineMetrics, with Wipfli Consulting Services, followed by a brief Q&A, which we have Scott, one of our account executives, moderating today. So with that, I will let Bill take over the presentation.
Great, thank you, Kaylee. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here, so you should be able to see it. All right, well, with that, as Kaylee said, my name is Bill Byther. I'm the co-founder and CEO of MachineMetrics, and I'm excited to spend a few minutes here with you just to tell you about what we're doing here. So MachineMetrics really is the machine data component of the digital factory. We really are the first industrial IoT platform that's designed specifically for discrete manufacturers. We've really combined the sort of the best of an IoT platform that offers innovation and extensibility with a packaged SaaS software solution to offer really quick value out of the box. So we really got our start about 5 years ago. We're not a typical Silicon Valley startup. We are venture backed, and we really look to combine the best manufacturing leaders with the best cloud software leaders to build a solution that offers real value to manufacturing. We've been recognized by numerous outlets like Forbes as a top 25 IoT startup. 2 years in a row, we've won the Smart Manufacturing Product of the Year through the IoT Breakthrough, and really we've been able to amass over 100 customers that are really improving their capacity utilization using MachineMetrics, and very quickly are able to improve their utilization rate, their efficiency, and really be more competitive globally. Our customers are global. You can see here, quite a few of them are in the US, where I imagine most of you are probably calling in from. So just a few minutes on sort of the problem and why we really got started. Manufacturing is as many of you know, is really the largest industry in the country, and it produces more data than any other industry. Yet the digitization in manufacturing is quite behind. You can see that when you walk a factory floor. There's just not a lot of data-driven decision making. So as a result, we see that the utilization rate of machines across the industry is really quite low. This number here, we happen to have a unique insight on. Really, this is the average utilization rate of all equipment that actually we connected last year. There's a tremendous opportunity to really improve utilization, improve efficiency and throughput, really by focusing on the data on the factory floor, and that's really where we really come in. Now, the solutions that exist right now, you'll see that there's these what I consider more horizontal IoT platforms. The problem with these platforms, while they provide a lot of flexibility and capabilities, in order to actually reach that value requires a lot of software development. A team of developers that are building specific use cases, specific features, for you to really see value from that. And connectivity can be hard, and implementations are long. As a result, and Cisco really presented this, and they identified that 76% of IoT platform implementations are actually failures. So that's a real problem that we're looking to address. And then, other solutions are more the traditional sort of on-premise software solutions. Some of these companies have been around for a while, and while they do provide pretty, some value out of the box, they really lack the continuous innovation and the ability to continuously push updates, leverage the cloud, leverage data, and ultimately being flexible enough, like an IoT platform, to really tie into your own business processes. So that's really where MachineMetrics has come in. What we've done is we've combined the best of an IoT platform with the best of a packaged SaaS application by making it very easy to connect to equipment on the factory floor. This diagram, I'll just spend a minute or two on it. Really kind of represents how the data flows from machines. We'll connect directly to the PLC, the control on machines, and we have a lot of IP that we built on our edge platform. You can see an image of that that allows you to very easily connect to machines or sensors that can augment the PLC data from the machines. About half our customers are able to install this themselves without us even ever really going on site. It's a very, it provides very easy, quick connectivity to your equipment. And with that, we pull the data from the machines in a very secure fashion. We are built on it's called the AWS cloud. We're actually one of only a dozen companies that's an advanced tier partner with Amazon Web Services, and we have industrial competency, which means that we've had to go through just go through many months of security audits and are recognized as one of the best. With that data, we're able to provide a very quick value, out-of-the-box value through reporting, diagnostic capabilities, alerts, instructions, and really this drives value throughout the entire manufacturing operation. So we're able to display production data and improve efficiency in production. We can identify problems with machines to help out maintenance. Include instructions to the maintenance personnel so they know how to repair machines when they fail. We even are able to provide data for other areas of the organization like R&D, engineering, and HR. And the way we do that is not only through our out-of-the-box capabilities, but you can see we connect to other best-of-breed factory applications. So systems such as like ERP or BI, business intelligence. The APIs that we have are very flexible, and we can connect to these other systems, or you yourself can actually extend the capabilities through the IoT platform. So it all starts on really connecting your machines, and we support right out of the box. You can see the image on the right is our edge device with an additional module if you want to connect to sensors like analog sensors such as accelerometer or temperature sensor. We make that very easy through just a simple web interface, and then the functionality that we have really allows you to connect to your standard machine controls. You can see some of these that are really common in sort of the machine tool CNC world, but also we support some of the open protocols, MT Connect, OPC UA, Modbus, so we can connect to virtually any machine. Newer machines will usually pull data right from the PLC. Older machines, it's often relays and sensors that we'll use. Once that data is collected, we can immediately improve shop floor visibility. You can see, this is a photo of one of our customers where you can see the sort of the shop floor dashboard that indicates the status and performance of each machine compared to the goals that have actually been set. And this is being pulled right from the machine data, but also the ERP. And with that, that sort of that low-hanging fruit, just the improvement in shop floor visibility, we're seeing 10, 20%, even sometimes 30% increase in efficiency, machine uptime, just by having that data visible. But then we offer so out of the box, we call it our foundational value props. So it really starts with just understanding your utilization. We're able to benchmark our customers against other customers in aggregate and really identify how our customer is performing compared to others. So just because if you're running at say 40% utilization rate, I can tell you that it's actually pretty good, and you might be in the upper percentile compared to others. And this really can help drive decision making. We also support notifications. So if you have a lights out operation, this can be really critical to identify problems. But also if the machine is in a particular alarm state or it's down for a period of time, jobs falling behind, those alerts can be configured to go right to your cell phone to take immediate action. We also offer the ability to sort of augment the machine data with an operator touchscreen, so that if the machine is idle and we don't know why due to the machine data, the operator can actually add human context to that data through the operator interface, which is part of most of our implementations. Is this just using a commodity tablet, inexpensive hardware. And then with that, we can identify bottlenecks through downtime tracking and really putting that out into a Pareto chart. But also we have many different out-of-the-box reports for identifying, optimizing your cycle time standards. It's one of the first sort of out-of-the-box value props that we see, where it's you don't often stand there with a stopwatch to really test out your cycles. You're actually pulling every single cycle from the machine. And we can pull that in and identify if your actual cycle time differs from your standard. And of course, we offer standard OEE performance reporting, again with the integration with most ERPs. So that's just briefly what some of the capabilities. But what we have many many cases like this one where. This is from a company called Wisconsin Metal Parts that a little over a year ago brought in MachineMetrics, and they were able to. The first thing they discovered was that that they were in the lower percentile of their machine utilization compared to others, and that really motivated them to to focus on their internal operations, not necessarily buy more machines, and improve utilization of their equipment. And with the data that we're collecting, enhanced shop floor visibility, they were able to increase their machine utilization by 30%. And really what that was able to do is improve their, essentially the number of operators per machine. I think they went from 1 or 2 operators, or 1 or 2 machines per operator to around 5 machines per operator. And you'll see many stories like this. And really what I'd like to do is hand this off to Mark Stevens. And Mark is somebody that we've partnered with for quite a while. He's a partner of Wipfli, and we're working with him pretty closely on a number of customers, and I know he has some stories to share. So with that, Mark, I'll let you take over from here.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill. And just do a quick process check. We should see a new screen. Is that the case?
Not quite yet.
I actually do see the new screen. Scott, can you confirm that?
Oh.
Yep, I see the Wipfli insightful reactions.
Great.
All right. Well, here we go. Well, thanks, Bill, and I appreciate the lead into the conversation today. And before we get started, I want the audience just to think about for a second after listening to Bill is imagine just for a moment of taking the historical wisdom of your organization, those seasoned individuals that have so much experience, and then combining that with data. And you got to ask yourself how accurate would our decisions be made if I could combine the two? And so what I'm going to do is share a story of a journey of a company that reacts a little bit different now. And they think a little bit different. And it all started with a CEO who connected some technology dots and stayed the course in what I'll say a cultural shift. And that cultural shift took them from what I'll say firefighting and reacting, rewarding that firefighting, to what I'll call planned reactions. So I'll take you through what that journey looks like. And let me set the stage. The company is not one of those hallmark companies. It's a second generation company. They're about 35 million in sales, and they're growing at 12% a year. And precision fabricator, they got a CNC shop with some of their value add pieces. They work in the OEM category, and they work with different vertical markets. And boy, that supply chain is really, really tough on them. So they're feeling the cost pressures. And the CEO knows that they could free up a little bit of capacity. They could do some tuck-in acquisitions along the way. And they're aggressively pricing to stay and get some capital or get some market share in some of these verticals that they want. And so the challenges that they're in front of them is they're winning business. I like many of these shops, but they're probably not shedding as much unprofitable business as they should. But with the visibility now, they're having different types of decisions. And of course, there's not enough people to support all this. And they would really like to fund their growth through some of their operations. And yeah, because they work in this supply chain, they're feeling the lead time reduction needs. And of course, this CEO knows that this reactive culture works maybe at 35 million, but boy, at 50 million, it doesn't feel like that's going to fit very well. So the business objective for them is to win back this lost time. And with that lost time, if they could fill that with business, what would happen, both from a financial perspective as well as from an organizational perspective. So I'm going to take you through kind of the story of what happened with this organization. It started with a CEO attending what I would call Technology of the Future conference. And she went to this conference and she came home with this mental picture in her mind. And she left with recognizing, boy, there's something going on here in this IIOT movement as it relates to manufacturing. As a matter of fact, she heard statistics that there's over a $9 billion opportunity in manufacturing for productivity gains by the end of this year. She also heard things about everybody and everyone is connected these days. And by 2022, the number seems almost unreasonable, but 14 billion people will be connected. And there's this GDP thing that's going to have just numbers that people just can't comprehend. But what she learned is that there's an awful lot of movement in this IoT space as it relates to gaining productivity gains and winning back some of that lost time, maybe not having to hire, maybe not having to make those capital acquisitions of new equipment, and of course, connecting their people. And what she asked herself was, how in the world do I take some of this maybe bigger thinking and bring it to my $35 million company? And let's talk a little bit more about what that looked like. Bill shared this story with you, and what they learned quickly is at the FMA show, which is the Fab Tech show in Chicago and Atlanta, she went there and she learned an awful lot about, all this equipment that's being connected. But she knew that she was in search of kind of winning back that lost time, and that if she could replace that time with more productivity off of her machines and do more with what she has today, she'd have a winning formula. But when she was at the FMA conference, what she recognized, a lot of this IoT work was really focused on providing diagnostic information for a machine at a single machine level. But she bumped into this company called MachineMetrics, and what they were offering is what Bill just talked about, is a solution that we can actually hang these devices very quickly on the side of a machine. We can take that data and just kind of push it gently into the cloud. And in the cloud, we're going to have some predefined dashboards, and we're going to ask those operators to touch the screen. And touching the screen is when we start a job, and when something's not going like we thought, we just want you to pick one of the many different reason codes, and we can collect and timestamp all that, and we can get some real-time performance. And I'm going to talk about how that kind of shifted the culture. And this particular CEO really took an ambitious position on OEE, which Bill talked about, and that's really understanding the availability of our machines, whether it's planned or unplanned downtime, understanding the speeds of those machines, how well they're doing against the manufacturing standard. And of course, quality was good or bad parts. This company I'm sharing this story with, they chose just to kind of park quality for the time being because they knew they made good parts. But the CEO also knew that it was a technology solution, but it was also somebody that was going to help them shift the culture, but more importantly is be a bit of an analyst and understand what was happening in an organization and teach and mentor their organization so they could accelerate their learning and get the benefit that Bill just talked about, 11 days of payback. So it was a kind of a neat combination. So I want to introduce you to Teresa, and Teresa is a second generation learner. She's really good at finding work. She listens well to her organization, but she knows that there's some people out there are feeling a little bit tuckered out and maybe they're running out of capacity. But she's got a hunch, like Bill talked about, that, man, I just don't know. It feels like we got more availability than what my organization at least feels emotionally. But without data, she couldn't really do anything about it. She was excited about these connected solutions when she came back from the FabTech show, but didn't want to get too far ahead of everybody because it would make her feel probably that she was too edgy and maybe the organization wouldn't adopt it. But she knew that if she could make some small changes at a quicker tempo, that she might have kind of another one of those winning formulas. And she needed a solution that she could show people so they became believers. So it became seeing as kind of a believing solution. And it wasn't too long once the decision was to run a handful of these machines, and we'll show you what those look like, is that this wasn't a long project. It was in just a matter of a few weeks, these machines were streaming data that started to validate some of her hunches. And the first screen that she pulled up, and it was built for her, was to start to look at kind of what's happening in her organization. And what she learned quickly is if we kind of follow those those black arrows, is that we learned a little bit about the availability, and that was planned versus unplanned time. And so of the machines that we set, which were critical machines, 83% of the time they were running, and 95.8% of the time for this window of time, which she only took for just a few months, we ran it for a few months, was running about 95% of the speed. Of course, we kind of parked the quality thing. But what it told her is that when you combine those things, she had some upside. But she also knew from her father the way that they put the standards together, they always had a little bit of a fudge factor in there, probably anywhere between 12 and 15%. But what it told her was her hunch was probably right, that she probably had some more upside capacity in the machines running one shift. So as we looked at some of the other things, that the other calculation, which is at 67.1, the OOE, says, geez, if I were to pull all that unplanned downtime and plan downtime out of it, I'd still have a lot more capacity. And of course, if I wanted to run a 24/7 operation, even if I could get the people, I have an awful lot of capacity. So she knew that selling out in front of the work and her organization's ability to deliver would come with time, but it wasn't going to take an awful lot of capital assets to make that happen. But she knew that she had to take a little bit deeper dive, and she had to create some type of campaign that allowed her to help the organization see things that she was seeing. And the first thing that she did was, where in the world is that time leaking away, that unplanned downtime? And what she quickly learned was, if you look at kind of the two yellows and that kind of that, what I'll say, aqua color, it tells us a couple of things, is that no personnel, inspection of parts, and changeovers were those are kind of the issues that they really needed to get a grip on. And so she created a battle call, and that battle call went something like this: let's make every minute count. And are the machines ready? How about you? And so what they learned, and I'll tell you through some of the stories, is that no personnel was kind of disturbing to them, because there was minutes and seconds that leaked away that added up to hours and weeks over time. And she also helped the crews understand is that they were better during a setup than the average pit crew that you might see on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon with NASCAR. But they got in a campaign and they got in a competition about reducing setup times. And likewise, they took that learnings and they applied it over the quality setups and the inspections. And so, well, they didn't want to lose any of their high quality, but the inspection times sometimes were long, and they wanted to compress that. So what they did is they created that battle call about every minute counts, the machine's ready, and they focused on reducing the lead time, or the cycle time for setups, as well as quality inspections. Well, she knew she couldn't do this alone, and so she grabbed her CFO, and I want you to meet Anthony. And Anthony is all about getting more out with what they have, and that's what you would expect from a CFO. In his battle call, or what you would always hear from Anthony, was, hey, variances are our focus, reduce them, and all that stuff just slides right to the bottom line. And if we could do with more with what we have, the profitability of this organization looks really different. But he wasn't a typical CFO that would just give us rear view mirrors. What he did is he said, I'm going to help this organization understand their cost of goods and how we can make proactive decisions relative to the cost of goods. And from that, we can also increase our margins, reduce our variances, and our profitability through reduction of cost of goods would go up. And he became kind of a mentor to people just outside the financial community. Here's what he learned. He quickly learned that I'm going to take a look at all the biggest jobs that we ran. And he only looked for a small window, and he looked, as you can see in the top right-hand part of the screen, he looked for a month, and he wanted to share with the organization the number of parts that they were running and how maybe poorly they were performing. And you can see that OEE calculation doesn't look very good. You can see it in the 60s and the 40s and even in the 50s was kind of some of those numbers. But he helped the organization understand, geez, the machines are kind of running at the speeds that we thought they were going to, but we have an awful lot of unplanned downtime that's occurring, and how do we get a grip on that? And what he did is he helped people identify where to go look for this stuff and employ different problem solving and some of the lean strategies that they had to make sure that we were focused on reducing that number of downtime events. But what he shared with everybody is if we could eliminate 50% of this unplanned downtime, it would reduce the need for overtime. And that was tuckering out the organization. They were paying time and a half. And that was kind of a movement that he put in place. But like good CFOs, he said, I'm just not going to talk about all the red stuff. I also want to look at where good things are happening. He went out and did his own research. And he went out and he wanted to discover what work centers were really performing well and what was the magic that was attached to them. And so you can see, again, looking at the two black arrows, you can see the performance for the most part, the machines are running, and some were running a little bit higher than standards. He's going to go back and, of course, look at the standards and make sure that those were adjusted appropriately. But again, what was going on with some of the magic that was happening with those high OEEs? And what he learned is that the technicians, the maintenance, the quality inspectors all sat together. And they had informal communications constantly throughout the day. And their scrum meetings or their beginning of the shift meetings were very, very different. And they had a whiteboard that had all the fixes that were in play. And so they were starting to leverage some of the information that this source was giving them. But what they were proactively looking at ways in which they could solve their problems, and they were interacting as a single unit, and quite frankly, having some of those proactive conversations that you may not have experienced in the past. Let's keep moving through the organization. I want you to meet Maddie. And Maddie was using some of the same information, but Maddie's she's a master of spreadsheets. And she's got probably some dated information, but it's comfortable for her. And she knows a lot about the operations. In fact, she spent some time on the shop floor before she advanced into this quoting and sales position. But she works kind of independently, and she's cranking out quotes, quite a few quotes a day, and doesn't have a whole lot of time because of the speed and the nature of what she's being asked to do every day. She's probably really efficient at what she does, but the real question is, how effective is she? And there's always been a question about some of these quotes that are coming in. And she had this private reference guide that she would use, and because she didn't trust the ERP system. And so she would establish her quotes based on maybe some of her own tribal knowledge and not a lot of historical data. So we had a kind of a challenge with Maddie, is to maybe help her look at something a little bit different. And so here's what we did. To say, Maddie, how about if we were to look at some historical performance? And I like your reference guide, and you can continue to have that, but what happens rather than being static? What happens if we made a dynamic reference guide? So when you're putting your quotes together, that you would be in a position to kind of have more real-time information, and that might make you think a little bit differently on some of those quotes. And so what we did here this is kind of an early example, and we knew that there was a particular customer that was coming through, and we had run 21,000 parts that were almost identical to this. And what we did is we took a quick deep dive, and what did we find? That, boys, and you can see there where that little black arrow is that 78.5% was our OEE, and our boy, we ran the machines really hard. You can see it 106% with our performance, but the availability, we really, really struggled. Now, if we would have only taken that data, she could have said, oh, I'm going to adjust my quotes. Thank you for giving me all this coaching. I'm going to adjust my quotes accordingly. But we said, hey, Maddie, before you do that, let's go one step further. And what we asked her to do is, hey, let's go take a look at those jobs and want you to kind of team up with the supervisor to know a little bit more about what happened with those jobs. And what we learned was, holy cow, an awful lot of our time was uncategorized. Now that would have led us to believe, well, where did that time go? And truthfully, that's a supervisor's challenge, is to get the operators to be a little bit more diligent on not just putting the uncategorized time into it. But what we learned was that uncategorized time, quite frankly, was setups. But what she learned even more was that the challenges that were associated with the inspection of parts. And what I liked about the combination of what happened here was that we took a little bit of history, we took a little bit deeper dive as to understand what happened with that. But then what there was a proactive conversation that happened, which never happened before, is between estimating and quoting and a supervisor. The estimator learned from that, and they adjusted their quotes based on that. And the supervisor also had a deeper dive of understanding what's happening on that particular job, and they made their course corrections. For those of you want to know, they put this, they changed their quotes, and yes, they did rethink the way it was, and they did win the business as a result of it. And they had this type of information available when they were in the quoting process. Here we go. I want to kind of turn the corner here a little bit, and I want you to meet Tony. And Tony is, boy, he's a wise guy, and he's built to react, and he just flat gets stuff done. And he's built the culture of firefighting, and he's been with the organization from its infancy. And quite frankly, a lot of people go home kind of tired because of the firefighting and that goes along with it. Tony's biggest challenge, quite frankly, is he doesn't use a lot of data to guide him. I mean, he's been around a long time, so he kind of knows the shop floor, and but he doesn't use that data. But you know what, he says, I'm ready to learn. And he knows that his style is kind of running out. At 35 million, he's got his arms around the tree, but when they go to 50 million, he just doesn't feel like that his style is going to work, and he needs help. And quite frankly, it wasn't healthy for him because he was captive to the plant all the time. So where did he start is that he says, all I want is visibility. And I want to be able to have teaching moments where I can share my wisdom with not only supervisors, but people on the floor, because that's what I'm really good at. But I just don't know where it's happening and how I can be as proactive as I possibly can. So he wanted to be able to catch stuff on the fly. And so that worked really well with his style. And I'll show you what he built. And he had the prettiest dashboard in the plant. You saw one from Bill that was very similar to that. But this became, quite frankly, the centerpiece of lots of discussions. It became what he called he posted his learning boards, and these learning boards were throughout the plant, and you could actually touch any one of these screens if you wanted. You could learn a little bit more detail if you want to. But what was interesting is Tony had kind of a new look, and he was carrying a tablet with him. And he was moving through the plant and through his different conversations and meetings, but he had a little bit more data of what was going on. And there were some alerts that were also built into this dashboard that if a situation were to occur and maybe that downtime was a little bit longer than he was comfortable, his supervisors and himself, they were notified that this was going on, and they had to make a decision of what they wanted to do with it. But what he learned from this and what he built from this, and this was some of the standard functionality that comes right out of the box with the MachineMetrics solution, is that he wanted to know the status of those machines. So if you look at the banner across the top, the green and the yellow and the red, that tells us what's happening with that CNC machine and whether or not it's idle or it's in setup or it's actually running. But that circle in the middle told a lot more stories. And that story it told was how well are we doing with our OEE and how many parts have we made. But that little white ball that's in the center, it tells me where I should have been. And as we chase the rabbit throughout the day, how close are we? And then last but not least is that the bottom piece of it was really about what's happening throughout the day. And that gives us kind of a chart that says what's happened with our startups and maybe some of our breaks. And what was really interesting about this particular dashboard is that you're able to actually click one more time on these screens and understand some of the downtime reasons that were occurring. So let's take a little bit look at what else he did is after the day settled, and he was really somebody that wanted to validate some of his intuition, his thoughts, and he heard that, you know, Tricia was saying, let's make every minute count here, and he wanted to know what was going on with those extra minutes in the day. And to his surprise, he found that no personnel was the number one reason why his machines weren't running. And as a result that he couldn't really pinpoint it, exactly what it was, because it was 1 minute here, 2 minutes there, 5 minutes there, and it had to do with the startup of the day, the transition during the shift, the transition during the breaks, the transition during the lunch. And he's not a type of guy that wanted people to work harder. He just wanted to make sure that those machines, when they were ready to run, we had personnel there. And what he was able to do with one more click, he could tell you exactly each work center and each individual that probably needed a little bit of help of making sure that they were a little bit more responsive to getting that machine running. He was comfortable in that space and his style, and he went on to effectively solve that problem and help people reduce that no personnel time. I'm going to talk a little bit about Stacy. Stacy, she's the heartbeat of the organization. She's got a lot of tribal knowledge, and but she just doesn't have a lot of information right now. And she's trying to schedule the plant, and she finds her day kind of chasing around and goes home kind of late. But what she knows is she's got a couple of individuals that really want to take over some of her role, and she's trying to teach them, you know, how some of the wisdom that she has. And so she saw Tonis Dashboard, and what did she do? She put Tonis Dashboard, that colorful dashboard, right in the center of the planners. So the planners knew exactly what was going on, so they could proactively make decisions based on real-time information. And what she then was able to do is she felt more comfortable that they were making decisions more effectively, and she could channel her energy where she could more fine-tune the plant. Here's what she learned. What she did is she started to look at the ERP system and recognizes that maybe the ERP system wasn't quite lining up with the standards and how they were scheduling the plant. And what she did is she created what they call a watch list. And from this analytics, we were able to look at all the different jobs that ran on different work centers, and they were kind of able to predict how well those machines would do with different types of orders. And they created a watch list for the planners to schedule accordingly. So if they knew that they were scheduling star 03 or star 09, there would be different perspectives. And they know that maybe star 03 was struggling for a variety of reasons, and only 60% productivity was coming out of that with OEE, where on the other case, star 09 was 91. So what they did is that she began to give more proactive advice to, excuse me, her planners based on some historical information. And that was really, quite frankly, a big lift in their on-time delivery. The second piece that she did, it was called the double check. And the double check is right before anybody did any planning, they asked that they would go ahead and look at a particular job. And in that particular job, what they were asking is look at the past performance, look at what the ERP is telling you as far as the standards, and then make an educated decision based on what you know or the conversations that you're having with the supervisors. So planning became very, very different as a result of this type of information. I want to introduce you to a couple more guys, and this one's Drew, and Drew's in engineering, and Drew's part of the business development efforts, and his job is really designed for manufacturability. He hears a lot of data, frustrated information, but he's really looking for ways in which he could actually help and pinpoint where he could really design products or help design processes that they're going to be more efficient. And he's also been part of the large cost downs that are coming from a lot of the supply chain that he lives in. So what did he do right away? I love this chart because what it does is he focused a lot of his energy on just setups and transition from one job to the next. And what he did was he took a deeper dive into looking at a window of time and all the different work centers, and also looked at how difficult it was to set up, were the jigs right, and where was there enough information available to these operators so they could ultimately transition from one job to the next. And he went to work with his buddy, who's the plant engineer, in helping make these setups become insignificant and reducing the setups. And he was the leader of the one that was really creating the kind of gamifying the setup reductions. But they had this type of information available to them so they could see real time any patterns that were associated with setup reductions. He also went one step further, as he knew they were getting some scrap and some challenges on some of their citizens. And what they learned was the OD on this particular machines was they were having difficult time holding it. And he had conversations with the customer about their tolerances, and then also they recognized that the aging of these machines and the PM programs that they're on probably weren't going to line up. And this became a capital investment discussion later on, is if we're going to continue to do business with these types of tolerances, we're going to struggle as an organization. We have to make decisions of whether we want this type of business or we're going to make some investments in these citizen machines. Here's my buddy Ben, who's the manufacturing engineer, and quite frankly, he's all about internal cost reductions and getting more throughput out of the plant. And he started his career, and Tony's been kind of the guy that got him started, and he's been a supervisor, and he knows people's process, and he's a huge advocate of making every minute count. And what he was looking for is where are these minutes that he could do his manufacturing engineering and his lean work, where could he focus his energy? And what he started with was preventative and predictive maintenance. And what I like about this is it allowed us this chart over this window of time of a month. It allowed us to begin to see where those PM intervals were happening or weren't happening, and how many minutes of downtime were occurring. But what's interesting, what came out of this type of information and the dialogue that went along with it, before you know it, the maintenance department, the technicians were asked to adopt a machine. And also then it almost became a bit of a horse in a race. And so each one of these operators or technicians were adopting machines as well as tools, and beginning to look at ways in which they could reduce that downtime. What was even more interesting in this story is there was a volunteer fireman, and the volunteer fireman was a technician. And he said, this is how we learn how to be ready for any type of emergency. And he taught some of those techniques. And before you know it, they adopted some of those as how they were going to respond to that unexpected downtime. And we also had a particular dashboard that also was a clicker. And I always say that it's interesting is that when this alarm went off, those workstations, and we had that unexpected downtime, the clock started. And it was really a response time of how long it took for this particular crew to respond to that unplanned downtime. And so we began to watch that, and it also became very visible to not only the people that were adopting these machines, but the entire organization as to, we have a situation, how do we deal with it? No different than a firefighter would deal if they got the 911 call. He also had some more data, and this is, you can even go down deeper into machine faults, but this was a chart that they used, a table for them to understand occurrences and how long things took. And he worked closely with the preventive and predictive maintenance team around just what are the challenges that were happening at the machine level. But what was interesting is that they recognized is how many instances, in this case, they had 72 records over that period of time. And they were all about reducing the number of records and number of time that it was called machine downtime as a result of some mechanical problem. And then the other thing too is that he was part of, this was interesting, he was working with the CFO, is he was responsible for the cost of goods reduction. And cost of goods reductions is interesting because you have to do kind of a post-mortem review. And without the data that MachineMetrics provided and some of the analytics that Wipfli's Shopfloor optics team was providing, it was hard for them to have those types of conversations. And so in this particular example, as part of that meeting is that they looked hard at a job that they ran and really recognized they had some variances as a result of it, but what caused that? And you can quickly see that uncategorized time in that operator, maybe not categorizing time for whatever reason, had to be something that they had to correct. But again, the setups and were the challenge, and those were longer than they'd anticipated, and they had to work through those things. But again, with this visibility, cost of goods conversations went from kind of emotional and unstructured conversations, and at one time they actually quit the cost of goods committee because they didn't have good structured data. But once Ben got this type of information, those conversations were much more productive and much more laser focused. The last guy I want to introduce you to, this is he's the shop floor supervisor, and quite frankly, he's the one who really uses this solution and it really made his job the most effective. And he's got a nickname called Radar. And he can detect all sorts of abnormal conditions, but he finds himself in too many telling moments and not enough teaching moments. And he really didn't have tools to be able to teach other than kind of his radar hunches. And he was really good at pairing people with machines, but he really knew that he's the only kind of guy that knows that. And the scheduling team really wasn't up to speed on that pairing. And with this information, they were getting smarter relative to how to pair people with machines. But he needed some more information so he could actually teach and mentor the people on the floor, but also the planners. So here's what he did. He got some help from Ben, and he built an operator view. And when he does his shop floor walk, he wanted to have meaningful conversations, recognizing the people that have done some really good things for maybe the day or the week or the month, or maybe the people that are struggling. How do you get some help for them? And so what he did is, this is an example that Operator 101 for the period of time, which was, a whole month. But this particular person, if we were going to run this job, similar job, the planners would want to recognize that Operator 101 probably outperforms everybody else. And if they were available, you would want to stack them up as that kind of that A team to run through that particular job. And this became kind of the learning moments that he was sharing with the scheduling. And this is that wisdom that was built in his head. And it didn't no longer need to be in his head, because the planners would have the same similar information they got on that watch list. You also know that there's people that are kind of the best practices, and also when it comes to compensation, who are the best people that you have. And in this particular case, he had kind of what his A team looked like, and what you looked at is the different operators and how many different work centers and how many different operations, how many parts that they were making, but more importantly, how well could they manage being effective. And as you can quickly see that, I'm looking at Operator 94, you can see that they did about 80,000 parts with it at 82% OEE, and they did it over 13 work centers, where their peer, the 92, Operator 92, did it over 10 work centers. So those two individuals are really strong when it comes to being able to not only manage the machine, as well as manage the processes that are going through those machines. And those people became, quite frankly, their best practices, and also became part of the learning tools and in the way that people documented the work. And we started to pull some of the wisdom out of their thoughts too. And the last thought is and this is what that meaningful walkabout that he had is, he would go ahead and had a tablet, and he'd walk around in the morning, and he'd have want to have meaningful conversations, and he could stop in at any given work center, and he could look at what happened yesterday, or he could look at what happened a week or a month. And this is really kind of a perfect view for them to be able to kind of study what happened, but at a part level. And they can actually kind of drill into this image and begin to understand what was the planned and unplanned downtimes, and the things that went well. What could you learn from that? And so it was a much more, what I'll say, learning moment and a proactive conversations when he had this type of information available to him. So when you thread all this together, you just got to ask yourself, what happens when you have what I'll say incredible visibility into the work at the work center level and at the lowest kind of denominator of the transaction in your organization. And what happens is that there's different conversations that occur, and they go from kind of reporting out to problem solving, and the meetings become much more effective, and there's much more contribution and engagement when people are in the know, and knowing that the data that they have is really kind of more of a reflection of what's really happening. But what happens is they pick up on patterns, and those patterns allow them to think ahead. And what I know is and it reinforces what Bill was saying earlier, is just by lighting this thing up and knowing that we got this type of information, you'll see productivity gains of 10%, just because there's an element of, I'll say, more precision around how we're managing time and how we're managing our decisions. But it's not uncommon with a little bit of focus and some continuous improvement to see 20 and 30%. And I've actually seen even much higher than 30% gains as a result of having this type of insight. And quite frankly, it drives kind of a much more proactive and engaging culture. So just last but not least is, as we kind of close out our time together is that we're really lucky to have this technology solution with MachineMetrics, and we've watched them over the years kind of continue to build this, and we've built a platform of advising and mentoring that supports that. And we call that our Shopfloor optics solution. And so if there's any interest and you've got challenges that sound like the company that I just talked about, or if you're looking at ways to improve the productivity of your organization, probably trying to get a little bit deeper insights of what's happening, or maybe even engage with the next generation workforce, I think we got some things that we can talk about. And if there's some challenges that that you're trying to prioritize where that continuous improvement effort needs to be, because we're all limited on resources, I think this is an avenue to help you get some better insights to that. So thank you for the time on today, and I know that we've got just a few minutes here left for some questions and answers. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm kind of done presenting here, and I'll let somebody else kind of take it from here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. We're now ready for the question and answer part of the presentation. Again, I really appreciate Bill and Mark being here today and sharing all of this great knowledge. We've had a few questions come in, and I know that there are some other common questions that we did want to address, so I will turn the mic over to Scott, one of our account executives at MachineMetrics, who will be walking us through some of those questions.
Thanks, Kaylee. So yeah, don't stop asking the questions, but just to address some of the common ones that have come in, I think this is more directed towards Mark. With so many priorities, really, how do you select what to optimize with this approach?
Well, I think it's kind of what the Tricia story is that you kind of got to reverse engineer for a moment the choices and the behaviors that you're looking for, and then ask yourself is what's the business objective that you're trying to accomplish. In Tricia's case, it was really about got to win back time, and we got to win back time so that I can replace it with either tuck-ins and acquisitions, or I got more business that I probably could push through this organization. And so what did she find out was that it was really about machine availability and to win those minutes. And so OEE, I think, is an incredible metric to use as an organization, because it really, it blends a bunch of functional people to act against one, measure, the combining, multiplying the availability, performance, and quality together. But I really like the fact that it really puts a microscope on availability of the machines. And I think Bill can probably contest to this, is most of our clients, what we run into is for the most part, quality is really, really good. And machine performance usually runs close, if not right on top of the standard. But what people are just really misled on is the amount of time their machines truthfully aren't running. And sometimes it's hard for people to believe when maybe Bill or myself or others might say, I don't think your machines are running any more than 40% of the time. And they look at you like you're crazy. And then once you start to hook these things up, you learn a different story. So I think it's important just to kind of reverse engineer what's your business objective. And the example I shared, I think, is a great way to kind of how it all lined up.
Great, thanks. And then a similar line of questioning that's been coming across is with leaders that are on board with proactive decision making. What are they typically doing with those insights?
Oh, yeah. Well, first thing we encourage them is they can't use it as a weapon. It has to be, you have to go into this recognizing that this available data is really about a learning lab. And everybody learns, including the very top of the organization. And I think what has been helpful is that there's a lot of unproductive meetings that happen because they're filled with emotion, or maybe hunches. And sometimes those hunches and emotions can be fairly accurate, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes they're destructive when it comes to just engaging people. So I always kind of like to remind people, and I think I see some of the best, is they kind of let the data speak first. And what I like about MachineMetrics is there's really not a lot of human intervention. The machine is producing this information, and the operator is being asked to just touch a screen. And it doesn't take long. In case of, we still get a little bit of that uncategorized time, but that's part of the training and learning. But that's not a whole lot of places where errors can occur. And so that data now becomes like kind of the book of record, and people can then problem solve against that. So, and then what I also see is that they're doing an awful lot of saying, all right, I see this improvement. What am I going to do with this? We're going to take action, and we're going to run our continuous improvement or Lean or Six Sigma or whatever programs you might have. They're going to line those efforts up with moving the dials on the machines, and they do an awful lot of testing and experimenting, and they're okay with something that doesn't work, so because they try another experiment, and as a result, the organization learns and they see the dials kind of change instantly.
Great. Appreciate addressing those lines of questions, Mark. And then this may be directed more towards Bill on the technical aspects. I've had a lot of questions coming in about what types of ERP systems MachineMetrics works with, and if the ERP data can be used to inform MachineMetrics. On the reverse, can MachineMetrics production data be used to inform an ERP system?
Yeah, Scott, I'll answer that. This is Bill. I know that we had one actually very specific question about, will the system work with JobBoss, and the answer is yes. There's actually an integration that they had built for us. So talk to us about that. But also we support many different ERPs, either through often we'll start with a very basic implementation where it's one way, and then depending on the ERP and whether we have integrations already been built, we can pretty quickly turn that data right around to automate the reporting capabilities in the ERP. So we just have to learn about which ERP we're referring to. There's as you all know, that's a very fragmented market. There's many ERPs in the space, yeah. So hopefully that that answers that question. But I mean, just further, we actually have APIs that are very specific around ERP integration. So we've made that process really easy. We can't say that we support them all out of the box, but the method of to actually build that with like a third-party integrator is actually fairly straightforward.
Great, thanks, Bill. Thanks. And then I'm not sure how much time we have left to keep answering questions, but another one that came in is around the implementation timing. This might be something that Mark, you can address from your experience in working with some of the customers that you've worked with, or Bill on a technical aspect. I'll leave this up to you guys to answer.
Sure, I'll take a run at it, and Bill will finish it. Part of our excitement about MachineMetrics, because Wipfli is a consultancy, and we have lots and lots of manufacturing clients that were in search of this type of solution, and we were in discussions, but they didn't want to have these long implementation cycle times. And I was absolutely fascinated when I met Bill and his group in Chicago at the FabTech show about how much they've done on integrating with existing controllers that exist today, and integrating with ERP systems. And so the short answer is that we've done proof of concepts where we have it within a couple of hours. We have streaming data. But I know that there's kind of a rule of thumb, but this thing gets measured in days and weeks to get these things lit up, not months. So, of course, depending on how many, but it's all about speed to use and speed to adoption. And they've done a masterful job with the technology. And of course, it takes time to help people understand what's happening with the analytics, but culturally, the shift happens fairly quick. Bill, I'll let you.
Yeah, and I think that you've really sort of hit on the fact that it really does depend on the shop and the complexity of the equipment. But often if you have more modern equipment, let's give you the example of basically just network machines. We can bring machines online within hours, and then you're reporting your utilization data very quickly. We have a customer success team that works directly with our customers for really getting our customers onboarded, and it's usually you see that initial value very quickly, and then we start to look at cycle time standards and really understanding downtime and even getting into more like predictive and prescriptive analytics. And usually that takes more time. So initial value very quickly within a couple of weeks. Long-term value, I mean, we keep pushing the envelope, we keep rolling out new capabilities so that there's always something new that we can discover with the data.
Great. It looks like we're just about time here, 1 o'clock. I want to respect everyone's time. If you did have additional questions, we will address each question via email and follow up just to make sure that you got the full answer, and also address any follow-up questions that you may have. Right before we end this, I just want to mention our next webinar coming up. The Manufacturing Analytics Journey will be in September in partnership with SME, and you will receive information about this along with the webinar recording and slide deck from today's webinar. Again, Mark and Bill, thank you so much, and everyone who joined us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar and potentially talking to you even sooner. Take care.